Imagine this, it's a cold morning, January 25th, 750, you standing on the banks of the Great Zab River, in what we now call northern Iraq. The air is thick with tension. On one side, you see the banners of the Umayyad Caliphate, a dynasty that has dominated the Islamic world for nearly 100 years, an empire stretching from the sands of Central Asia to the shores of Spain. On the other side, a new force, born from whispers in the dark, from years of resentment, and fueled by the fire of revolution. This is the Abbasid army. By sunset, one of these powers will be shattered, and the course of history will be irrevocably changed. This is the story of the Battle of the Zab, the day an empire died and a new one was born. To understand why these two armies were about to clash, we have to go back. The Umayyad Caliphate rose from the ashes of Islam's first civil wars. They established their magnificent capital in Damascus and forged an empire of staggering size and military might. They were builders, administrators, and conquerors. Under their rule, armies pushed the frontiers of the known world. Yet, beneath this glittering surface of power and conquest, deep cracks were forming. The Umayyad state, for all its efficiency, was fundamentally an Arab-centric empire. If you were a Muslim but not an Arab, a Persian, a Berber, an Egyptian Copt who had converted, you were often treated as a second-class citizen. You might pay higher taxes and be excluded from the top echelons of power. This created a vast and growing pool of discontent. Imagine fighting for an empire that refused to see you as an equal. The resentment simmered for decades. On top of that, there were grievances among the Arab elites themselves. Powerful tribes and regional leaders in places like Iraq and the eastern provinces felt sidelined by the ruling family in Damascus. They saw power being centralized, their own influence waning, and they yearned for a return to a more decentralized system where their voices mattered. And perhaps most critically, the Umayyads faced a crisis of legitimacy. Many devout Muslims questioned their right to rule. They were seen by some as worldly kings, rather than righteous spiritual leaders. They were criticized for their luxurious lifestyles and their deviation from what was perceived as the simpler, more pious rule of the Prophet Muhammad and the first caliphs. This religious opposition was the spark that would eventually ignite the revolution. Into this volatile mix stepped a new family, a new movement. The Abbasids. They had a powerful claim. They were descendants of Abbas ibn Abadob, an uncle of the Prophet Muhammad himself. This lineage gave them immense religious and political credibility. They didn't just want to seize power. They presented themselves as the saviors who would restore justice and true Islamic leadership. Their campaign was a masterclass in revolutionary propaganda. For years, their agents worked in secret, spreading their message throughout the eastern provinces, especially in the vast region of Khorasan, in modern-day Iran and Central Asia. They didn't initially campaign in their own name. Instead, they called for a ruler from the family of the Prophet, a clever and ambiguous slogan that appealed to a wide range of opposition groups. They promised an end to discrimination, a government based on piety instead of ethnicity, and a return to the moral principles of early Islam. They were offering a new vision, a fresh start, and for millions of disillusioned people, it was an irresistible promise. By the late 740s, the secret movement exploded into open rebellion. Province by province, the black banners of the Abbasids began to replace the white banners of the Umayyads in the east. The revolution had found its army, and it was marching west. The reigning Umayyad Caliph, Marwan II, was no weakling. He was a seasoned military commander who had spent his life on the frontiers of the empire. He saw the threat coming and understood its gravity. Gathering the full might of the Umayyad professional army, he marched east from Syria to crush the rebellion once and for all. He was confident. His troops were experienced, well-equipped, and loyal to him, but the Umayyad state was exhausted. Years of internal strife, smaller uprisings, and constant warfare had stretched its resources and manpower to the breaking point. Marwan was leading an army that was powerful, but brittle. And so, we return to that fateful riverbank. On one side, Marwan II and the Umayyad imperial army, the old guard, fighting to preserve their century-long dynasty. On the other, the Abbasid forces, a coalition of Khorasani troops, disaffected Arabs, and fervent true believers, commanded by Abdallah ibn Ali, the uncle of the future first Abbasid Caliph. The Abbasids were an unknown quantity to the Damascus elite, but they were disciplined, ideologically motivated, and battle-hardened from their campaigns in the east. The battle began. The Abbasid commanders employed a brilliant and, for the time, unusual tactic. they ordered their spearmen to form a solid wall, planting the butts of their long spears into the ground and pointing the tips toward the enemy, creating an unbreachable barrier of steel. As the Umayyad cavalry, famed for its devastating charges, thundered across the plain, they crashed against this immovable wall of spears. The charge broke, the momentum was lost. Then, the Abbasid line advanced, not in a wild, chaotic rush, but with relentless, disciplined pressure. Their infantry pushed forward, a grinding, unstoppable force. The Umayyad army, stretched thin and demoralized by the failure of their initial charge, began to waver. Cracks appeared in their line. A few soldiers turned to flee, then a few more. Suddenly, the wavering became a panic. The disciplined Umayyad line, the pride of the empire, completely collapsed. The defeat turned into a massacre. Thousands were cut down as they tried to flee back across the river. The great Zab ran red with the blood of the defeated army. The power of the Umayyad dynasty wasn't just broken, it was annihilated in a single day. Caliph Marwan II managed to escape the battlefield, but he was now a king without a kingdom, a general without an army. He fled west, hunted by Abbasid agents across Syria, Palestine, and finally into Egypt. There, months later, in a small town on the Nile Delta, he was cornered and killed. With his death, the last Umayyad caliph to rule from Damascus was gone. The victory at the Zab was total. The path to Damascus was open. The Abbasids marched into the Umayyad capital, and a new, ruthless phase began. To secure their power, the Abbasids decided to eliminate the Umayyad family entirely. They hunted down and systematically executed every prince and powerful member of the old dynasty they could find. In one infamous story, an Abbasid governor invited 80 Umayyad nobles to a banquet under the pretense of reconciliation, only to have them all clubbed to death during the feast. But one escaped. A young Umayyad prince named Abd al-Rahman, known to history as the Falcon of the Quraysh. Through a series of daring and brilliant escapes, he fled across North Africa, dodging assassins and hostile tribes, with nothing but his wits and his royal name. After a journey of 5 years, he landed in Al-Andalus, modern Spain. There, he rallied the local Umayyad loyalists and established a new emirate, a surviving branch of the Umayyad dynasty that would flourish in Iberia for another 300 years, creating a legendary culture of its own. But back in the east, the world had changed forever. The Abbasids had won. They soon abandoned Damascus, seeing it as too connected to the old regime. They moved the center of the Islamic world east, back towards their power base. First, they built a new capital, and then, under the second Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mansur, they founded a city that would become the stuff of legend, Baghdad, the city of peace. For the next 5 centuries, Baghdad would be the epicenter of the world, a hub of science, philosophy, medicine, and art, presiding over what we now call the Islamic Golden Age. The Battle of the Zab wasn't just a change of rulers, it was a profound social and cultural transformation. Power shifted from the Arab tribal aristocracy to a much more cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic imperial elite. Persian administrators, scholars, and cultural norms became hugely influential. The Abbasid Caliphate was an empire where your faith and skills mattered more than your ethnicity. It was the fulfillment of the promise their revolution had made. So when we look back at January 25, 750, we see more than just a battle. We see a turning point. A river was crossed, a dynasty that had defined an era was ended, and a new age for Islamic civilization and for the entire world had begun. The battle itself was over in a day, but its consequences, the new world it created, would echo for 1,000 years. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what other historical events you'd like to explore. Until next time, stay curious.